Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. And thank you for tuning in to my show, Reflect and Refresh with Zebunisa. My name is Zebunisa. I'm an NHS worker, I'm a mother, and I like to raise awareness of important topics. I have with me today Carl, who has around 35 years of experience in the mental health services. He is a coordinator for organisation which is developing a peer support role, and he has also himself experienced some poor mental health, similar to myself. So welcome to the show, Carl. Thank you for coming today.
You're very welcome. Thanks very much for inviting me.
So I know that you have a lot of experience in mental health, and I know that you've also experienced mental health yourself. So before we go into your experience, I just want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, what you have done. I know you are a bit semi-retired as well, so you have a lot of things that you have done and that you do. So if you could just let us know a bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, that's fine. I've been working since about 1984 in mental health services, and it was around that time I experienced my own mental health problems, and I think working in services brought out some of the stuff from my earlier childhood and other experiences that meant I really struggled with my own mental health. So I think over the years I've traveled a bit of a journey to look at how I kind of cope with myself, how I develop, what people I surround myself with, and the sorts of things that I do. So I've tried to kind of embark on a healthier way of life and spend more time out of doors. So I've got a lot of outdoor pursuits. I've got a very loving wife and family. So I'm incredibly lucky, really. But when poor mental health strikes, it doesn't matter what you have. You get robbed of every bit of quality of life. You can be the most fortunate person in the world in material terms, but if your mental health, well, when my mental health has been poor, I've just had nothing. And it's been a rocky journey over decades. And I think part of my learning about my own mental health has helped inform me about how I work with people. It's increased my level of compassion and understanding of how even little things can be a major problem for people when their mental health is poor, and that's been the same for me.
So, I think previously we've mentioned, when we've had previous discussions, I mentioned that I had a baby about 3 years ago. Then I became unwell, and then following that, I had a few more spells of illness, and I had a total of a year in hospital if I calculated it. What was like the background of your story and how you became unwell?
I think it goes back to childhood. I was quite a small child. I have dyslexia. That meant I struggled a lot when I was at school, and it was very misunderstood back in those days. So I kind of built up a sense of failure in my mind. And then I was also bullied relentlessly because I was small. I moved area, so I was different. So I was an easy target for people to bully. And I think the bullying leaves a lot of trauma behind. So going into kind of my kind of teenage years, my family, my parents split up, and there was more trauma like that. And a lot of things kind of happened one after the other. And I think my kind of early sort of kind of periods of depression were based on a real lack of confidence, almost a self-hatred. I would look at myself in a mirror and I would kind of tell myself what a bad person I was, because that's the story that I got from those around me. And I I think it was misunderstanding, but I think my family saw me as lazy and didn't make an effort when actually I had very genuine struggles. So there was no safe place for me. I didn't know who I was. There was no safety. And it was those sorts of things that spiraled me down into depression. I started to use alcohol to compensate.
Sorry, how do you recognize that you're unwell? Like, how did it happen with you? Like, did you recognize straight away? Did it take some time to get help?
I think because I know there's a bit of a paradox, really, because when you work in mental health services, you sort of know the facts, and it's almost like you should know better than to become ill. So I knew I was becoming unwell when my kind of fears and my anxieties increased, and my sleep broke up, and I was just getting more and more and more anxious. My skin would kind of flake. I get rashes. I get stomach problems, and then eventually, it was like hanging onto the edge of a cliff emotionally, and my fingers would be hanging on, and then my fingers would just tire, and I would release, and that would happen literally overnight. I'd go to bed, very stressed, very anxious, and I'd wake up in the morning and just go, that's it. I can't get up. I can't do anything. And I just stopped eating, drinking. I didn't call people. I didn't want to see people. I just completely withdrew and just curled up in a fetal position in bed, and everything seemed too big.
Did your parents recognize this?
Well, I wasn't living with my parents at the time, and relationships were strained with them because they had split up not many years before, and they were quite toxic about each other. So they weren't people to really trust. And I guess this is where the kind of emergence of peer support starts for me, because the people who I could let in through my front door and see me were people who had some sort of experience of things themselves, because they knew they could look at me in the eye and understand. And I didn't feel judged, and I felt safe with those people who could say, look, I know you can't feel this right now, but I've been there. I know what this feels like. And they might just sit with me, and they wouldn't say anything or do anything. But they knew that just being in the room with me was probably affording me a little bit of comfort. And it was.
So obviously back then, when you were unwell, you said from a young age.
Yes.
Obviously now peer support has developed, and it's only sort of developed in 2010. So that's a long time from then to now. So I'm sure that there wasn't much support out there when you needed it. Things have now only started to develop.
Well, what's very interesting, because I've been in kind of mental health services since '84, and that was initially working for the NHS and then working in the voluntary sector. Peer support was there. But it was a different language. It wasn't as much understood, because when the recovery movement started back in the early '80s in America, it was very clear that from the early, what they were calling themselves survivors of mental health services, and they were basically arguing the case that they were the experts by experience. They were the people who knew what it was like to be unwell, and they were the people who knew what to do in terms of helping people restore themselves. And very early on, I can remember in some of the services I was managing back in the early '90s, we started to try and get volunteers in who had lived experience of mental health to befriend, and we use the term befriending as opposed to peer support. And what we've noticed was that, as I had in my own personal experience of having somebody else who understood from their own personal experience of sharing when they came to visit me, is that there was a different type of relationship that was built up between those people who had come as our befrienders with lived experience, coming to just kind of socialize and spend time with the people receiving our services at the time. But it wasn't called peer support back then, and I think that started to be noticed, and then I think more academic work happened in the background, and like you say, in the 2010s, then it really emerged as a well sort of researched type of role that makes a key difference in supporting people with mental health issues.
So like when something gets recognized, so peer support was recognized in 2010, I feel like that's when more funds, more support goes for it, and then it's supported generally. And that's why I said it was recognized in 2010, and
Yes.
there's a lot more support now. And even now, it's like, because I work in peer support, it's developing now, even though that was 2010, and now we're in 2025, it's fresh now. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, so it's a so for those of you who don't know what peer support is, it's someone who offers the help and support to someone else, and they are someone who have experienced mental illness themselves, and they're helping someone else who has also experienced mental illness. And this is something I do myself, and there's also something that Carl does as well. He works for an organization called NCHA, which is it Nottingham Community Housing Association?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you work for that organization at the moment, and yeah, you are developing some peer support roles there, and you're you're a
Yes.
coordinator there, I believe.
Yes, I'm the volunteer coordinator for the organisation, and we have a number of accommodation-based mental health services and some mental health services where we visit people in their own homes. And what we have is people who want to give a little something back. So we've had a number of people who have used our services, been through hospitals and mental health services on their journey of recovery, who want to give that little bit of something back. And I was contacted by one individual in particular who said, is there a peer support role? And I said, well, currently no, but you and I are going to develop something, and we're going to do this kind of quickly. So from my own personal experience, but I also did my research, because I can't just use my experience as a basis for developing a role. Obviously it informs it, but so I kind of got in contact with a few people, I read some articles, and we started to put this role together. And this individual was somebody who wanted to be in the role, so I worked with him. It was very much a co-produced initiative, and it's still developing now. And part of that development is me meeting you at the development day, because the peer support worker said to me, well, if you want to keep up to date with peer support, come along to the development day. So hence I did. But yes, it's an ongoing.
Sorry, what you're saying is the peer support development day. So what they're trying to do with peer support right now is they're trying to get us all connected, get us having good networks. And Carl and myself met recently at this development day, and we connected, and we said, yes, we'll do the radio together. So that's why we're here.
Why we're here.
And we wanted to raise awareness just of peer support generally, and just about some of the work that Carl does as well.
Yeah. I think with peer support, there have been other elements that have come into what we've been doing in terms of mental health, and I think the peer support role is kind of quite important in doing this, and that is and I think I mentioned this to you, is the connection with nature, and getting people and supporting people to be back out in nature has been a kind of another factor in kind of helping people restore some of the fundamental connections that they have with the outside world. I know certainly from my own mental health experience, when my mental health is poor, I retreat and I don't go out, and that only compounds the problem. But the person who supported me, who I would say was my peer support worker, a good friend of mine who's had his own mental health issues, and I've supported him while he's been unwell. So we're kind of a peer support partnership that's gone on for years. But the first thing that he does with me when I've been really, really down is he gets me outside, and he gets me just walking. And sometimes if I've been frightened, he'll kind of hold my arm, but he gets me out walking, and I can't put into words what it actually does to me, but it makes a difference. As soon as I'm outside, it makes a difference. And the legacy of that is I spend as much of the year outside as I can. As soon as the weather's warm enough, I'm outside, because I know it really improves my well-being. There's biological factors, there's all sorts of factors that have helped. So, I mean, just processing of vitamin D. Most people in the UK are short of vitamin D because we spend too much time inside. The problem with that is that one of the chemicals in our mind that we need to stimulate positive mood, serotonin, is stimulated by vitamin D. And vitamin D, we need ultraviolet light to process it. So it's really important, even at that basic level, to just get out in nature.
I totally agree. It does. I know research shows that it reduces stress levels, anxiety, depression.
Yes.
It really does help you when you just get out there, get some fresh air. Even I was saying last week on my show that when you're feeling down, when you're going through depression or anxiety, when I went through that myself, the first time I go out, I might not feel like it, but then after making it a routine, doing it a few times, then you start to enjoy it. You start to see the benefits.
Yes. I mean, it moves on to sort of I'd say a spiritual dimension. I mean, spiritual in its widest term, in that it helps you become more meditative. It brings you more into the present, because when you're outside, you're stimulated with all your senses. So, the wind will brush your skin, so you feel the wind. You've got beautiful clouds, you've got the greenery, that's all ever changing. So again, it's stimulating. You hear bird sound, you have the smells of flowers and things. So there's a lot that's immersing you in that experience, and it's all very natural to us. We have only spent time indoors in kind of recent decades, and that's particularly in the West. Most of the world, people still live outside. They farm. They're doing very practical things to survive outside. It's not our office-based, screen-staring culture, and that connection with nature just makes such a difference. I did manage a project called Nature in Mind when I used to work for Framework Housing, and the difference I saw when people would indulge in regular activities outside was incredible. A lot of the people who we supported also had volunteers with them who were people with lived experience, so they were peer support people. And we had an allotment, we did walking groups, we did cycling, we did canoeing, we did art outside, we had drum circles, so they played djembe drums outside in a drum circle, lots of other different activities. But what was incredibly interesting was that there were people who had tapped into all sorts of other therapies, been in and out of mental health services for years. But there were quite a lot of people who, say, had been in services for 10, 15 years, who would just say, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I mean, the records that we got from testimonies from people who just found the regular experience of being outside with peers with the same sort of lived experience in nature was transformational.
So imagine like being a patient and you're in the ward all day. So that bit of fresh air, doing those activities are what you look forward to. That's one thing. And then the other thing is, like, when I'm seeing patients, when I'm working in this mental health unit, they could be like really nervous, really anxious all day. And then when it comes to gardening, they're the happiest person ever. Do you know what I mean? So you can see the benefits straight away.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely wonderful. And I mean, I wish the government would kind of see that this is the kind of, that connection with nature is probably one of the fundamental missing factors in a lot of people's poor mental health.
Another good thing which is coming about now is mindfulness. That's
yes.
a massive topic in mental health now, and they're trying to promote that. As peer support is one thing they're trying to promote in mental health, and the other one is mindfulness. And I see a lot of this being advertised, a lot of promotion about it, promotional work, and a lot of training going on about mindfulness. What's your thoughts on mindfulness?
Mindfulness sits at the heart of my life. I kind of looked into kind of meditation and mindfulness probably for the first time about 25 years ago. I meditate probably a couple of times a day on average. I even meditate while I sit in the car. I had little bite-sized pieces of meditation I used to just bring myself back into the present. I find it incredible. One of the things for me is it helps me keep life in perspective. It's very easy, particularly if your mental health's starting to get poor or you're under stress, the mind can just run away with itself. You're fearing the future, you're judging yourself by your past, and you're failing at that point in time to just recognize that you're a human being who has the right to live and be on this planet, and you're living right here, right now. And it reminds yourself you're an okay person, you're equal to everybody else on the planet, you're no greater, you're no lesser than. And it's a very calming thing. It helps me put my life in perspective when I meditate.
When we're describing mindfulness, for me, I'd say it's about trying to be mindful of the things around you, using your five senses, and trying to recognize what's around you. Like, what can you hear? What can you see? What can you touch?
Yes.
Doing these sorts of activities to feel present, and these sort of things are meant to be calming for you. You know, if you're feeling generally, or if you're feeling unwell as well, or just a general thing, and it's something in that the mental health and the NHS are trying to promote at the moment. So I think it was a really good topic to talk about, because not everyone might not know what mindfulness is. It's just raising awareness of the topic generally.
Yes. I mean, my route to mindfulness, I was talking about meditation, but what that did was it trained me in mindfulness. So, you know, even now I'm kind of immersed in what I'm doing, what we're talking about. I'm very conscious of how I feel. I can remember just before we started, I was thinking, yes, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. I've not been on the radio before, and I just kind of I managed to talk to myself about that because I noticed it. And that's what the mindfulness does for me, is I notice the detail of each experience of my life. You know, I eat a meal, I will eat that mindfully. I'll taste the food and I'll stop to think about the taste of the food instead of just eating it and it just being consumed. The same if I've got a cup of coffee here, and I'm enjoying the coffee, but I'm noticing it. And that noticing is the bit of mindfulness. And it equates to also a little bit of emotional intelligence as well. Through mindfulness, there is a level of self-monitoring that I get, and I know that is part of that practice is noticing where you're at, is noticing the temperature of your anxiety, your mood, your general sense, and then being able to make the adjustments, to have that conversation with yourself, to use one of your coping mechanisms to then rebalance. And it catches things at an early stage. So if I find myself in a situation where there's an element of discomfort, before understanding about mindfulness, I'll probably go into that situation and feel uncomfortable and feel more uncomfortable and allow that to just accumulate inside me without noticing it, because I felt I ought to be in this situation. It's expected of me. Where now I will just go, well, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't fit with, what other people's expectations are, that I have to put that to one side, because if I don't regulate myself, then nothing works.
I agree. And I think in mental health, it's important to recognize your boundaries and communicate that. And because you need to put your mental health first. Your mental health is your priority. Your mental health is your priority. As someone who's gone through, experienced mental health, I'd say your mental health is your priority. So you need to put those boundaries. You need to communicate. Even communicate just generally about what is comfortable for you, what's not comfortable for you, and also Also, the other end is communicate when you're feeling unwell. Seek the support.
Absolutely,
100% seek the support.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Would there be any sort of advice you'd give to someone struggling with mental health?
The first thing I would say is try and talk to one person that you can just trust. Let somebody into that feeling, because I think a lot of people I've spoken to, as their mental health changes and becomes poor, one of the first things that a lot of people do is isolate. There's shame. Society is very, very judgmental in so many ways. But one of the things is that the mental health still has a lot of shame attached to it. And, it's something that everybody experiences, but so many people just don't talk about. People will use all sorts of different facades to kind of make you think that they're confident when they're actually not. They're probably very anxious inside. So anybody who's feeling kind of a bit closed off, a bit isolated, lonely, talk to someone, if you can, face to face, and just say how you feel, because I don't think there's a person on this planet that doesn't feel anxious at some point in time, doesn't feel depressed at some point in time, doesn't feel like they're not worthy at some point in time. And to have that experience shared and somebody to just reflect back, no, I feel like that too sometimes. It's the start. It's the start of just improving your kind of situation. Because if your mental health is becoming poor, if you stay in the same situation and do the same things, you'll get the same result, and you will end up feeling worse. And something has to change.
And also sometimes talking is a good suggestion from you, Carl, because sometimes, like, I've spoken to a lot of mothers and they will be going through depression and all sorts of things after birth or just generally, and they don't know they're going through that until they've had a conversation with someone who said, you might want to talk to your doctor. So sometimes the talking kind of gives someone else a hint that you might be going through something, and then they suggest to you that, oh, maybe you should talk to your doctor, and then that gets you the help you receive that you need.
Yeah. I think particularly for early mothers, it's incredibly important, because I think more so for early mothers, from my experience of working with early mothers who have had mental health problems, they, because their situation has changed dramatically, there's one child or maybe more children suddenly in their world that they have entire responsibility for, and have to immerse themselves in the care of that child, learning afresh, because it doesn't matter how many books you read or whatever, you're doing it for the first time. And if your mental health is poor, you're so immersed in this child that you've got to nurture, then so many women don't nurture themselves. They're too busy doing this thing of kind of caring for this child, with the expectation that they're going to cope with that. Society expects that is their job. They can survive this. They can do this with ease because it's natural. And I think that also allows this kind of sense of failure to creep in. Most of the mothers that I've spoken to, when their mental health has become poor, they talk about how they failed as a mother, a key identity in their life. And they see that they failed at that. And that is so damaging to those mothers, because they've not failed, they've just been human. And the sharing, that first conversation is so important. So, I would urge any mother to have a network of other mothers.
100%. Like, so I was unwell when I became a mother, and imagine being a mother. All of a sudden you're a mother. You've gone through pregnancy. Now you're a mother. You have a baby in your hand, and it's like a project, and nobody's briefed you about the project. And in general life, when you're not briefed about a project, how do you feel? And then now think it's a project, but it's also a human being, and it needs a lot of things in the beginning. It needs to be fed, needs to be changed. It's crying all the time. So imagine you've got so many alarms on your project, and it's going beep beep beep, and how stressful that is, just hearing an alarm all the time. And compare that to a baby crying. It's very stressful generally in the workplace, and I can imagine at home as well, non-stop. So for mothers, it can be very challenging, especially if you don't have this support. So I'd definitely say my advice is get the support, make sure you have support, and you just need to communicate when you're struggling. Because a lot of the time in mental health and generally, and especially in the Asian community as well, people don't communicate when they're struggling. And then they just continue to struggle, and then later maybe they might get help, or maybe it might be a bit later, or might be a bit too late when they're getting the help. So it's better, as soon as something is happening, it's better to get the support straight away rather than wait till later on. But either way, I have to say the mental health system I think is great here in the UK. I've received a lot of help when I've been unwell, the very few times I have been unwell. And I feel like it's a fantastic mental health system that we have here. What do you think, Carl?
I think it's very good. I think there's a lot of scope for improvement, but I think you see that when you're within it. But yeah, it saves lives. And I think particularly when we kind of come back to peer support, I think that provides such a good network for people who need a safe person to talk to. It's really important as an early sort of intervention. I'd love to see peer support develop more. I'd love to see peer support develop for very specific groups like early mothers, so that there's a good network. It would be good if primary care practices would kind of say to pregnant women, whether it's the Asian community or any other community, but particularly the Asian community, as you said, there is people don't tend to talk, but to kind of link pregnant women up with other pregnant women, so people can travel that journey together, and they can start to have those conversations before they have children, and then there's a network for people if they do start to have a low mood. Because even fundamentals like sleep is really disrupted for those first few months of after you have a child, possibly longer, depending on how your baby kind of settles. So those networks are really important. I think the improvement for me in mental health services could be around peer support, earlier intervention, and prevention.
100%.
So that has to happen at a primary care level. I think there needs to be a little bit of intelligence that provides that network so that people don't escalate into needing hospitalization. If the network surrounds people, I think people are generally going to be a lot safer. Obviously, there's always going to be some people where that network doesn't work and people will need hospitalization. But if we can prevent more of that, that's all to the good. Social prescribing has been talked about for a long time, and I think social prescribing is very important, where a GP can offer sort of referrals to other organizations that might help a group of people. It might be a self-help group, it could be a nature-based activity, it could be all sorts of different things where there are people with similar experiences coming together. But I think it needs to come from a kind of single point source, like a GP practice. That's my view. But I in my 40 years now, over 40 years of experience in mental health services, I've seen incredible change, tremendous change for the better. Out of all proportion, we've got very good mental health services, and it'd just be good to see them develop more.
What would you say to someone who wants to get into mental health work or like peer support? What would you say to them? Any advice?
I think anybody who's looking for that, look for a local organisation that provides a mental health service, and just contact them and offer something up. Say, you'd like to do. Have you got a peer support role? I think if you go to Voluntary Action Leicester, they often have peer support roles advertised, and also the Leicestershire Mental Health Partnership. The NHS Trust, the manages mental health services in Leicestershire, they have a whole peer support department. And I think contact them, they can develop you. Nottingham certainly has a good peer support department, and they provide courses to help develop you as well. So, if people have inquiries, I'm happy to field some inquiries. I think it might be worth putting some of the contact details on the website, maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
Certainly for Val, that's Voluntary Action Leicester, and maybe the two mental health trusts in Nottingham and Leicester.
You can follow Carl on LinkedIn. It's Carl Colton. That's CARL, and the surname is Colton, COLTON. I just had the last sort of question for you. Do you have any projects or work that is upcoming that you have going on that you can tell us about?
There's always a few projects. I think we're looking at a partnership with Nottingham Trent University. Their psychology department run a sandwich courses for all sorts of social care type roles, and we're going to try and establish a year volunteering option for people who are going through that course. That's in development. We're hopefully going to advertise that soon, and it means that people can come in. We're looking at peer support roles there, and it will help people develop their skills and work alongside people in need of support. So that's one thing. We're trying to do some work with the Prince's Trust and develop opportunities for placements for people on doing the Prince's Trust courses. we also have a number of different projects where we do sort of makeovers of people's houses who have disabilities or illnesses where they can't kind of do their gardens. So they're decorating projects. It's a bit of kind of social impact that we can have. So we get groups of people going in and, doing a makeover of somebody's property or garden. And we, if it's a garden, we try and kind of use principles of sustainability. So we'll plant up wildflower seeds and put up bat boxes, create hedgehog habitats, bird boxes, so that we're kind of improving the natural pathways for wildlife. So there's all sorts of things going on. I get new projects kind of coming in every few days. I have a great job, so I'm very happy with it.
Wow,
But please get in contact with any interest.
You're doing a lot of fantastic work.
Thank you very much.
It's really great. Even when I spoke to you in person and now when I'm speaking here as well, it's really nice to hear the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much.
If you want to follow Carl, I'll just mention it again. It's Carl Colton on LinkedIn. So that's CARL, and his surname is COLTON. Or you can follow myself, which is mind_off_mum. So mind_off_mum, MUM. And Carl, is there any Ramadan message that you wanted to say to the listeners? You've got about 30 seconds or so, if you want to say anything to the listeners.
Well, I wish you all a very happy Ramadan, and I really hope you enjoy Eid when it comes round. Have that wonderful feast, and take care, everyone.
Thank you so much, Carl, for coming on the show today. How did you find it?
I found it far less stressful than I thought it would be, so I'm very happy, and it's nice to be able to share things. And I hope don't be alone. That's all I can say. Don't be alone. Talk to someone.
Definitely, that's a really important message that you've mentioned today. Don't be alone if you're struggling. Seek out for help. Communicate.
Yes.
And be open about it.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
No problem. Thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll see you again next year on the radio.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.